Hello, listeners of Align with Your Dharma. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am excited, as always, to have my guest today. My guest today is a sports podiatrist and an elite distance runner. He's Dr. Ray McClanahan, who was unsatisfied with the inconsistent and temporary results which was offered through conventional symptom management techniques like orthotics, medication, and surgery. He was also frustrated with his own persistent foot pain and recurring running injuries. So, for both his patients and for himself, he desired to cure the root cause of the foot problems rather than just settling for symptom management. This is where he was completely in alignment with what I offer for my clients in my medical massage. I go for the root cause of what is causing the issue rather than just working the symptom. So I am completely aligned with the speaker today. He also embarked on a mission to discover a truly curative method of foot care. So over time, through clinical experience, literature review, footwear analysis, and observations, he realized the powerful healing effect of rehabilitating and strengthening the feet. Yay. And that natural toe splay is an essential component of long-term foot health. Yeah, I totally agree. As a yoga instructor and a classical dancer, I totally agree how it is important for the natural toe splay. So ultimately, he developed correct toes, and we are going to talk about that further, which is customizable and comfortable toe spacers that would enable his patients to combat and prevent common foot problems. With his new approach to foot care, Dr. Ray successfully reversed his own foot problems as well as those of thousands of patients. So for which he's thrilled and grateful, and I am grateful for that as well, for what he's offering to the community. Today, the correct toes have become a vital tool for those who find their highest joy when in motion. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Ray. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to my listeners. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have you. So let me ask you, describe your journey. I know I gave a little bio, but can you go a little bit in detail? What brought you to here and what is your passion behind your profession?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Aruna. Yeah, I think I started on this journey mostly due to my own personal suffering. When I was a youngster, I tended to be a very energetic child. I might have even been diagnosed as being hyperactive. So I played every sport that I could possibly play, but I fell in love with running.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I started getting injured almost immediately after I started running.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't figure out why, because I read all the magazines and I had the right shoes and I thought I was doing the right thing. But I got injured from the very beginning since age 17. And
Mm.
even though I was injured, I did go to college on a track and field scholarship. But a lot of that time while I was at college, I was still injured. And
Mm.
I took a lot of Advil and I had a lot of medical procedures and cortisone shots. And unfortunately, it wasn't till many years later that I recognized that part of those early problems that I experienced were not necessarily due to my body. They might have been related to external factors that I was putting on my body, which we'll dive into today. But essentially, I decided to go study podiatry in Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
to see not only if I could learn about how to help myself be a better runner, but also to see if I could figure out how to help the sports medicine community to stay active and avoid injury. So I went out to Philadelphia in 1991 and I studied at the Pennsylvania College of Podiatric Medicine. It's now Temple University College of Podiatric Medicine, but I finished in 1995. And then I moved back to Portland. I'm from Washington originally, so I moved back to Portland because at that time, based on my podiatric teaching and studies, I believed that one of the best ways that I was going to be able to help people was with surgery. So I moved back
Mm.
to Portland and I did a 2-year surgical residency, and I learned how to do the operations that are commonly being done for the common foot problems that people experience, bunions and hammer toes and heel pain and so forth and so on. And I'm sure you talk to people about this all day, every day. Um, During that time, however, I actually was experiencing a bunion on my own feet, and my
Mm,
second toe was sitting on top of my big toe. And I
mm,
know you're probably seeing some toes like this in your practice as well.
mm, mm, mm,
The irony of that, though, Aruna, was that I was operating on people who had the same kind of feet that I had.
mm,
And after 2 years of doing those operations, one part of the operation kind of bothered me, and it made me kind of question whether or not I wanted to have that on my own body,
mm,
which is, you know, the anatomy as a therapist, a medical
mhm,
massage therapist. So when we look at the big toe, there's the reciprocal and antagonistic balancing between the abductor hallucis and the adductor hallucis. And
mhm,
10 times a week, I was cutting the adductor hallucis off of the base of the
mm,
big toe and the little sesamoid bone as a component of the operation. Yeah, that's how I feel today.
mm,
Back then, though, I felt like it was the appropriate thing to do since that's what I was trained to do.
mhm,
However, after about 2 years of doing that operation, Aruna, I decided that I wasn't quite comfortable having somebody do that to me, mostly out of fear that I wouldn't be able to keep long distance running, which is really my passion and my joy. And it makes me really happy. And I love being around people who also love to do that. So around the same time, I was receiving a podiatry periodical called podiatrymanagement.com.
mm,
And
mm,
there was an interesting article in there called Why Shoes Make Normal Gait Impossible. And that kind of caught my eye because I consider myself somebody to be really interested in gait. And when folks came in, I did watch the way they walked and ran and stood and so forth. And I was trained to look at certain things and kind of predict how that person might do. But essentially, when I read Dr. William Rossi, Why Shoes Make Normal Gait Impossible, which, by the way, for your audience is on the website,
mhm,
correcttoes.com, in our articles and lectures.
mhm,
Um, when I read it, it really shocked me, Aruna, because I didn't learn any of what that doctor taught me in podiatry school.
mm,
And basically, what he taught from that article, and if you have a chance to look at it, it's a pivotal article. Um, it talks about several design features that are built into most of the footwear that we wear every day. And I'm not talking, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I can tell you already know, which is great. But none of those things had ever been taught to me to be negatives. And
mm,
one of the things I find fascinating about podiatry, and we should probably go into it a little bit to help people understand what podiatry really is, it's largely an allopathic pursuit. So unless the audience isn't familiar with that, our allopathic community is our MD medical community, the community that typically does prescribe medicines and does a lot of surgery through the orthopedic community. In essence, you spoke it perfectly a moment ago when you talked about root cause. I don't see the allopathic community training themselves or their students in root cause. The training I got didn't have anything to do with root cause. The training I got was to blame something on the patient's body, heredity, biomechanical abnormality, overuse injury, blah, blah, blah. And those things occur. Obviously, you would agree with that. However, um, Dr. Rossi helped me to understand or start thinking about what we're putting on our body may actually implicate some of the injuries and troubles that we have as much as our heredity and our biomechanics and our posture and our movement patterns and so forth. And I barely slept that night because I couldn't reconcile what I was about to do the next day: put more people on the treadmill, make more orthotics,
mm,
prescribe medicine, and do surgeries. Um, so essentially, I shut off the treadmill. I still look at gait, but it's not the first line. The very
mm,
first line is, if you're a brand new patient coming in to see us, we show baby footprints. I've got 2 daughters, and so I've got their birth certificate. Here in Oregon, we stamp the baby's footprint in ink and put it on the birth certificate. And I tell the client, I'm practically 100% sure you were born just like my daughters, meaning that the tips of your toes were the widest part of your feet. And this is nothing surprising or new to you as a yoga instructor, because when I did yoga early on, all of my instructors said, spread your toes,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody that can spread their toes has better balance and they can hold their poses better. Early on, I couldn't spread my toes. I didn't know how to spread my toes. But
Mm-hmm.
point being, Dr. Rossi taught me to start thinking not just about blaming injuries and diseases on people's bodies, but start considering that there may actually be a whole lot going on with all of the things that you just graphically used your hands to describe: the elevated heel, the tapering toe box, what's called a toe spring, where the ends of the toes are above the ball of the foot,
Mm-hmm.
heavy, stiff shoes that have too much cushioning.
Yes.
Um, I believed in all of these things because I was told that those things are helpful, and
Yeah, it
they
gives you
would.
enough, spring, and it's a shock absorber. That's what I was told.
Yeah, same. And I believed in
Mhm.
it until I kept seeing all of my patients coming back who are wearing those shoes still getting hurt. I also still got hurt wearing those kinds of shoes. So Dr. Rossi helped me to conceptualize that there might be an underlying primary starting point for addressing foot and ankle problems well before blaming it on hereditary biomechanics, overuse, etc., and well before poking on the tender spot and saying, here's what your diagnosis is.
Mm.
So when we approach it that way, it's more of a naturopathic approach. So
Mm.
it's more what you said several times now, which is root cause.
Mhm.
The naturopathic community has 5 principles in the way they practice, and one of them is totally causum, which is you don't treat a patient unless you're actively looking for the root cause. So largely, I went from being a conventional podiatrist that thought big shoes were good and arch supports were good, and some people are going to need surgery no matter what, to understanding that what we put on our feet is intimately related to the problems that come into my office. And quite frankly, consequently, can be cured often with education and awareness. And so that's what we do a lot here. And it's gratifyingly successful, even for older folks. But it really requires people to start thinking about their footwear as health equipment, as opposed to what most of us do. Most of us want to know if our shoe looks good, is it fashionable, does it match our outfit, and so forth, and how are people are going to perceive us based on what we have on our feet, which are powerful influences, and we talk about it every day. Most of my clients are ladies, which you might not be surprised by, and when I share all this with them, that is one of their greatest curiosities: is can I dress up again? Can I wear pretty lady shoes? And we do encourage people to do that from time to time, but a fascinating thing happens when people's feet get healthier. Those kinds of shoes become more uncomfortable. They literally can't tolerate. So we'll outline all this. We'll give them a plan of care. They'll go home. They'll get better footwear. They'll get stronger. They'll spread their toes, and they'll create that nice neurologic awareness between their feet and their brain. And then invariably, many times they will pull a shoe out of the closet that they used to wear often and maybe even all day. And they'll come in and they'll say, yeah, I'm feeling better, but why can't I wear my old shoes anymore? They hurt me. And I kind of joke and I say, well, my job's done. Just listen to your feet.
Yes.
But it's really a reality. Once our brain and feet work well together, they defend that in a way, which I think is a wonderful thing.
I totally agree, and I can completely resonate with that, because I went just like you said. I used the toe spacers, and then my toes spread out, and then after doing that, I went back and wore the shoes that was the toe was squished again. So then I was getting foot pain, and I'm like, what am I doing? I didn't do anything, because I do classical dance, so I'm not wearing heels all the time. So I'm wearing the toe separators and then going back to the shoes. And then I'm like, finally I made the connection. Okay, Aruna, you are wearing the toe separators, then you should wear the shoes where that encourages the toes to be separate and not squished again. So that is like sending information to the brain. It's like, what are you doing? Listen to me. So now I'm like, I'm happy. I don't know why I got like 3-inch heels, and some of them I wore only once. And I'm like, I happily donated to, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, where they were cutting off the heels and then they were repurposing and sending it to third world countries. And I'm like, well, it's going for a good cause. whatever they want to do, because if somebody else wants to enjoy, fine, because I've been there, done that. Now I appreciate my health more than, the fashionable shoes. But I was going to ask you, for your patients or clients, where you have helped them recognizing what they were doing to their feet, and then better neurological connection between feet and the brain is done. Do you have any shoes recommendation that you have on your website, where they can wear not so much stilettos, but but still fashionable, where people truly appreciate their health more than looking fashionable or being perceived by others like, well, she's dressed fashionably, but it's so for those people, do you recommend anything on your website?
I do, but it's kind of a challenging situation because people have to be willing to wear what we offer, which for a lot of people's consciousness does not perceive or does not seem to be fashionable or not something they want to go out in. So yeah, we have some shoes for the ladies that do care more about their health, who are willing to wear a flat shoe that's wider up front.
Mm-hmm.
My experience oftentimes, though, is that unless a lady has had problems with her body or ongoing foot pain, many times they're not really willing to make that change.
Mm.
In fact, a few years back, we had to decide to start screening our patients, mostly because I spent several visits with folks talking about what you and I are talking about today,
Mm.
only to have them at the end of the visit say, well, I would never wear a shoe like that, when I showed them a natural shoe. So,
Mm.
but to your question, we do have some shoes that try to look good but be healthy, but it's a huge challenge because what most people perceive to be fashionable is the opposite of what's truly healthy. So there's two primary features built into shoes for fashion, and those are the elevated heel. There's no physiologic benefit whatsoever to having an elevated heel. And then, as you mentioned, the pointed tapered toe box.
Mm-hmm.
There's no benefit there at all. That's also for fashion, but it does deform people and it creates all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of toe issues. We have a shoe list, and it's on our website. And I could speak to a couple specific brands, but probably better than that, Aruna, I want to tell your audience about a wonderful lady who we work closely with. Her name is Anya. She
Mm-hmm.
has a website called Anya's Reviews.
Mm.
And she tackles your question better than anybody I've ever come
Mm.
across.
Mm.
She understands women.
Mm.
And I'm a man, and I conceptualize what women's wants and desires are, but I don't care what my feet look like. I just want to feel good. But she gets it. So she puts out videos all the time, Facebook, Instagram. But
Okay.
what I like about, what's that?
No. How do you spell Anya's reviews?
Yeah, it's ANYA' reviews.
Okay. And she
Yeah.
has YouTube and Instagram?
Yeah, and Facebook. She's also got a website. She also has a web store.
Okay. And
Um,
it's all Anya's reviews.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So your audience might really appreciate that resource. She is a young lady that had her own set of problems, was
Mm.
told not to go barefoot, was told she needed all sorts of supportive devices and wore all the shoes. And unfortunately, she still had back pain and
Mm-hmm.
foot pain, and
Mm-hmm.
was told that she had flat feet, which she did in 2017. But she did everything that you and I are going to talk about today. And she posted another follow-up photograph of her arch. And
Whoa.
she built her arch back up,
I'm
which,
glad you're shedding light on that, because that was my next question. For people who have fallen arches, they think that's the end of it all and they cannot build it back up. Okay, so go ahead, please.
yeah. So she actually rehabbed her own arch, and she took pictures of it to show that it actually did happen. We see it quite frequently here in the clinic. Flat feet are over pathologized, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
starting with children. But recently, a study was conducted on children with flat feet and children with normal arches. they had them move about the playground, run, jump, climb, and so forth. And they measured how did the flat-footed children do compared to the children who had more normal arches. And there was zero difference between the two.
Mm.
Yeah, they both could do everything functionally. Um, some cultures in the world, particularly the African culture where I lived as a teenager, most of their arches are flat, but they
Mm.
don't hurt
Mhm.
and they're functional. So if
Mm.
you look at the world record for a lot of the marathons, they're oftentimes African gentlemen
Mhm.
who, if you watch them in the last couple miles of their marathon, they are pronating like crazy. So for your audience, if
Mm.
you're not familiar with that, pronating means that your arch rolls inward and becomes flat.
Mhm. Flat.
Yeah, so you're doing that. And
Mm.
I was taught that that's a bad thing and that's always going to cause problems. And sometimes it does cause problems, but not always.
Mm.
What I think is way more important is to have a strong arch, regardless of its flat or high arch. If the arch muscles are strong, folks can be functional no matter if they what type of arch they have.
Mhm.
What your audience would benefit from learning, though, and you probably already know, is there are a few types of arches that can be problematic,
Mhm.
but they're not what we just talked about. They're not the certain cultural differences. They're not the children.
Mhm.
They are, you probably have heard of posterior tibial dysfunction.
Mhm.
So that's your 50-year-old middle-aged lady who might be carrying a little bit too much weight and she's really not healthy. And then she will rupture her plantar or her tibialis posterior tendon. And in one day, her arch will go flat. That's a problem.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's not an arch that's going to get better with strengthening or toe spacers or better footwear. And then there's also a few rare entities. Occasionally, people are born with what's called tarsal coalition. So that's where two bones in the back of the foot and the ankle are growing together. So your
Mm.
calcaneus can grow together with your talus. Your calcaneus can grow together with your navicular.
Mm. Mm.
Those kinds of flat foot problems cause your perineal muscles, which you're familiar with, to go
Mhm.
into spasm,
Mhm.
and then the foot gets flat. That is a problem, but it's rare. So I
So,
would,
so to shed light, so the perineal muscle is more on the side rather
right?
than, yes. So the side
Yes.
of, okay, okay.
Yeah. So if those joints in the back of the ankle are fused, and oftentimes since birth, and we know this because they've taken aborted fetuses and they've actually done autopsies and they've got coalitions. So
Mm.
it's present at birth unless you like jumped out of an airplane and crushed your subtalar joint. You can get a traumatic coalition, but overwhelmingly they're genetic. They're at birth. Um, the problem there is the brain senses that there's something wrong with either the subtalar joint or the calcaneonavicular joint. And then it tells the perineals to try to inhibit motion at that diseased joint. And unfortunately, that overactivity of the perineals, as you know, where the insertion points are, base of the fifth metatarsal medial arch, it forces that foot into pronation and it becomes a rigid flat foot. So we call it a perineal spastic flat foot. That's
Mm.
that's a problem. That's probably the worst kind of flat foot to have beyond what we just described, the acquired flat foot where the lady ruptures her tibialis posterior tendon. Beyond that, I would encourage your audience to feel very optimistic and positive of their ability to rehab their arches no matter what height they are.
Okay.
I primarily treat a sports medicine community, mostly runners, hikers, and walkers, and I've got arches of all types. And I've learned as I've been careful not to pathologize them the moment they come in the door, but more listen to what their story is like and how are they functioning. I've come to the conclusion that I'm not automatically going to make those people feel bad about their anatomy, and I'm not going to automatically try to artificially support it.
Thank you. Yeah. So artificially supporting, what do you see artificially, like orthotics, and then what else?
Yeah, footwear primarily.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if you look at athletic footwear, most of the major brands, Brooks, Asics, Hoka, Nike, Adidas, on and on and on, most all of them have the old school mentality, which has since been thoroughly called into question, if not disproven in the medical literature. Um, most of those companies have this idea that you need arch support. So they put in an air wedge, or they put in a cloud or a foam or a gel, or you name it, some proprietary material, leading the walking, running, hiking community to believe that they are going to function better with that under there. So it starts in the footwear community. However, the insole orthotic industry is a multi-billion-dollar worldwide industry. So if it's not enough to have all that motion controlling, supporting features in your footwear, there's also industries out there that want you to put more inside of that footwear. So think about Spenco, Superfeet, which I used to work for 5 years. These are over-the-counter products. Dr. Scholl's. I mean,
Yes.
there's probably 100 companies out there that make something you can buy at your drugstore. The reality is, for most people, those are not needed. And if they do use it, should be temporarily used and not thought of as a long-term. I'm trained as a podiatrist to tell people that we're going to diagnose what their foot type is, make whatever particular orthotic will fit their foot type, and that's a lifelong process. They'll come back year after year and get their new orthotic, and I think that's bad medicine, personally.
Well, you get repeat clients and repeat patients, right?
You're right, Aruna, and you're right. And I had another podcast earlier today where the interviewer asked me, why are those products pushed so much?
Yes, exactly. I was going to say.
And you hit it on the head. Yeah.
You get more clients. Yeah, you repeat clients. They come back to you because, after some time it wears off, the cushion wears off and whatnot. So they are like, okay, now I'm feeling pain again. So they feel like they are kind of like making their clients disabled, like they are dependent on that.
Correct.
So can you share some light on why do you think we don't need those orthotics? Why?
Yeah, well, I'll be careful to say some people do. But when I came out of podiatry school and I worked for Superfeet, which is a subsidiary of Northwest Podiatric Labs, so they make custom orthotics, so you get that made at the doctor's office. I think there's a lack of awareness of footwear, like I mentioned. If you don't understand what elevated heel, tapering toe box, toe spring, rigidity do in terms of causing your arch to pronate or flatten out more than it would naturally, then you can see your way clear to putting something into that shoe that deformed you to try to mitigate some of the damaging forces. So it's like the old adage, two wrongs trying to make a right. The shoes make our feet weak and then we overpronate. And by the way, for your audience, I did a video that kind of goes into more detail on this. It's a 5-minute video. It's called Pronation versus Overpronation.
Okay.
And in that video, I positioned my foot the way a conventional Adidas running shoe would hold anybody, which is higher in the heel. The ends of the toes are above the ball of the foot. The widest part of the foot is the ball and not the toes. And I position my foot like that, and then I pronate my foot. And you'll see from the video, it's super simple because that's not a stable construct. That's not how we're built. But if we look at how we're built, and you only see this at birth in America, the baby footprint, or if you've gone abroad. If you look at barefoot cultures, you'll see that our heel bone, our calcaneus, is one end of our arch, and it should always be flat and level with the other end of our arch, which is the ball of our foot and our toes. Correct. Yeah. But when you start looking at footwear, it quickly should become apparent to almost anybody listening that in most shoes out there, you're not going to be able to position yourself like that. So your arch, believe it or not, is actually going to be kind of reversed.
Whoa, yeah.
As opposed to an arch. Yep. So if you're in a shoe where the heel is higher and your toes are up in the air, it might help to put something there, because it's going to feel a little bit better for a while. But the problem that I encountered when I made a lot of orthotics is people would feel a bit better, but then as their feet got weaker and weaker, they started having their old symptoms back. And they would come back to see me and they would say, is there a better orthotic, or is there a different shoe that I should wear with my orthotic? And I tried desperately back then, and we didn't have a lot of success. And I think that the reason why is we weren't going about it the right way. You
Mm.
know, we weren't fixing root cause. We were putting treatment into the disease causing agent, the shoe, and expecting health and success. And you already know it won't happen.
Yes.
Or I should say, at least temporarily. In the long term, it's not a good strategy.
Um, so do you encourage people to walk bare feet in, sand, different textures like grass when it is not winter? And even in the winter, exposing our feet to different textures, with the snow or whatnot, and walking bare feet on the concrete, and doing things like that, exposing it to different textures. Even though people are like, oh, I don't walk on bare feet, it's like, and even at home they have like home shoes. So you get off from the regular shoe that you're wearing outside, and then you quickly shift to the home shoes, so the feet does not have it does not see the ground or different textures at all. And no wonder they feel like, it's achy and pain, because home shoes, wear off and you get cushioned again, you cushion it and it's comfortable. And, when you go to the gym, if you're comfortable, you have to put some stress on the muscles for you to build the muscles. And so, if we are like always comfortable, same with the feet, right? And
True.
then
Yeah.
it does not help it to strengthen at all. So once even with the body, even with the mind, right, when there is challenge, it helps us strengthen, mind wise, and even at the body when there is a challenge. When you're comfortable, if you're lifting like 5-pound weight and trying to build the biceps, and your body gets accustomed to it, after some time you don't see any change, or it's like plateauing. Then you give it some challenge, then it's like, okay, now I'm sweating and building some muscle, and strengthening too. So do you think that applies? um
Yes. Yeah. 100%. It's interesting. As a podiatrist, I'm trained to tell people never go barefoot. And you might
mm,
not be surprised to learn that the lady I just saw before hopping on here with you was told by the last podiatrist that she saw that she was not even allowed to walk from her bed to her bathroom barefoot.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. So, two things fly in the face of that for me, at least. One of them is I grew up in Liberia, West Africa, and I literally was in the middle of the jungle where there's no shoe stores, So, if you might have been lucky to have a flip flop, but probably you went barefoot.
Mm,
And we played gravel, and we played soccer on a gravel field. And I remember watching my friends running across large chunks of gravel and didn't hurt them. And I thought, how are they doing that? And I took my shoes off and I thought, I'm going to try that. And I tried to stand on the gravel. I couldn't stand, much less consider running across it. But I also remember looking at their feet and thinking, wow, their feet are way different than mine. They've got these large calluses under their heel and under their whole front of their foot, not the kind of weird calluses you see and I see when you're working on people and I'm working on people, like only under the second metatarsal head or on the medial foot or out here on the foot where shoe pressure.
mm-hmm,
These are actually helpful physiologic protective calluses.
mm-hmm,
So that's why they can do these wonderful things. But the other beautiful thing about barefooting that I've discovered as I've looked at the literature is it does make our arch muscles stronger, and that's irrefutable. In the last 10 years, there's been plenty of studies that have looked at ultrasound images and MRI images of what happens if you go barefoot for 6 months or a year. The cool thing is that for your audience that doesn't necessarily know that they want to completely go barefoot, except maybe in their home, which I really strongly encourage, and on controlled surfaces, the studies are pretty clear that you can gain the same benefits by wearing a very thin-soled shoe for protection that still allows you to feel the ground. So
mm-hmm.
you're still gonna get strong. You're still gonna have that nice information from your feet to your brain. Your arches aren't gonna get weaker. But I don't think there's anything more powerful to rehab feet than being purely barefoot. And when I started my journey, I I hung out with the people who have written the barefoot books, like Michael and Jessica Sandler wrote Barefoot Running and Barefoot Walking. Daniel Howell wrote the Barefoot book. And these are people that live entirely barefoot. They get kicked off of airplanes because they're barefoot. They get kicked out of the grocery store because they're barefoot. Restaurants. I was with Michael. We went to a raw food restaurant and they saw our bare feet and kicked us out. But if you really examine the issue, it's not very well thought out. The reasons why they think you're going to step on glass or slip or whatever, spread germs, pick up germs. You're more likely to get diseased with footwear, not our bare feet. But they all told me, beware, if you take this adventure and you go down this path, you're going to start craving it. And you're going to start craving textures. And I had no awareness of what they were speaking of. So I logged it in. And since I have subsequently experienced what they mentioned. So every opportunity I get, including in the winter, I go barefoot. And my neighbors kind of look at me and they chastise me a little bit. And one of them said not long ago, "You should know better. You're a podiatrist." And the reality is I do know better, and that's precisely why I'm doing it. The key, though, is to go slowly, as I'm sure you're aware. There's a lot of books that have been written about going barefoot or wearing minimal natural barefoot style shoes. And it's inspiring and it can really help us to live a better life. But it's like anything else. We really have to take our time so we don't hurt ourselves. I call it more of lifestyle medicine. You're not coming in and I'm not going to give you a shot or give you a pill. I'm going to empower you to slowly build your proprioceptive nervous system, your glabrous epithelium, that specialized skin on the bottoms of our feet, which is like the skin on our hands. And once people do this safely and healthfully, I very rarely hear any negative. Occasionally I meet somebody who's super sensitive and it takes them longer, or, there's the outlier here or there. But think about, I'm not sure where you grew up, but when we were kids, we did a lot of running around barefoot, sometimes even in the rain, sometimes even in the snow. So between you and I actually, well, and the audience, I love the experience of my feet on snow. So about 3 years ago, pre-COVID, I flew out to Ontario to meet with Nick. And we also had Jeff Shub, the urban barefoot guy. He's an orthopedic doctor he's going the path that I'm going, which is getting away from surgery, getting away from insurance, teaching people how to be aware, and not just their feet, aware of everything, nutrition, water, our relationships, and so forth. But we had a lovely weekend, and we not only worked on the beams that Nick gave you, we did
So
stand out.
just for the listeners' perspective, Nick is the one who introduced me to toe spacers that was silicone-based toe spacers, and he has a page called Foot Collective, and that's how I came to know about the toe spacers. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no worries. Yeah. So we stood on his porch. It's December in Ontario, and we made footprints in the porch, and it was lovely. In fact, we also did a polar plunge in the St. Yeah, we stayed in there for about 3 minutes in 3-degree water. But this is another example of creating awareness, and to your earlier point, challenging ourselves. Our society is so much encouraging us to go for comfort, the nice squishy couch and the nice squishy shoes and the food that gives us instant gratification and addicts us and so forth. But yeah, I love engaging my feet, and I love encouraging other people to engage their feet.
So on those lines, when you said go slowly, I was going to ask, I see it on your website too, that you're suggesting how they can gradually build, because somebody who's used to wearing all those cushion, it will be drastic for their body to address and shift to the natural flat shoes. So what do you suggest for those people? Start with maybe with your correct toes for some time, and then would you suggest asking them to wear for 5 minutes to start with? What do you suggest?
Yeah, it kind of depends upon where they are in their life. In other words, I've discovered that younger, healthier people can make that barefoot transition much quicker than somebody who's older. And the reason there typically is, if you're looking at older feet, I'm looking at older feet. How often do we see the extensor tendons on the top of the foot coming from the extensor muscle group here that you're familiar with? If they're coming into my office and their foot's like that and their fat pad is up here, they're going to walk on their bones and nerves, and they're not going to like that at all. In fact, a lot of the ladies that come in and tell me, I ask them, go barefoot in your home a little bit. And they say, no, I can't walk on my hardwood. I can't walk on my tile because it feels like I'm walking on rocks or my bones. And they are. So for those people, we definitely use toe spacers, but we also love metatarsal pads.
Okay.
So if your audience isn't familiar, it's a pad that goes in the metatarsal arch of our foot. Excuse me, Aruna. That pad pulls our fat back in under the ball. And then we begin having people stretch. The opposite of the stretch you're going to see online. Online, if you look at all the podiatry, they're like, stretch your plantar fascia.
But
that
this
is
way, yes,
yes.
And this is much better. Yes, and I'm working on it too. And when I'm doing yoga and doing the up dog, and it's so helpful. And even just tiny bit. And I've seen people do it in just 3 sessions. 3 1-hour sessions. I've seen them improve in their up dog, where they're like, first they are like, oh my goodness, I cannot do it. And they are doing this the whole time. And I'm like, well, start with a little bit, on your toes. And then slowly they are like really bending. And I'm like, yes. So
Awesome.
baby steps.
Yes. Yep.
And I was going to ask you about the metatarsal pads. I'm glad you talked about that. So let me ask you this. What is the greatest challenge you had overcome, or you had to overcome? And what is the lesson that you learned from that challenge?
Do you mean in podiatry or all of life, or?
You can pick.
Okay. I would say my greatest challenge with podiatry would be trying to influence the rest of the medical community, particularly podiatry. And I think a lot of podiatrists read the podiatry journals and they go to the podiatry conferences and they talk to their podiatry colleagues. And so very rarely do we get challenged beyond that, to think about maybe strengthening is important, maybe proprioceptive input, balance, and so forth is important. So I think my greatest challenge has been to try to convey to my colleagues what I learned from Dr. Rossi, another podiatrist. We're starting to make some slow inroads, but that's been my greatest challenge, is to be an advocate and stand strong for having healthy feet, having healthy, unsupported feet that don't rely on expensive treatments, don't need aggressive, invasive surgeries. So that's probably been the greatest challenge. Yeah.
Okay. And what the lesson you have learned would be what?
I've learned to try to be diplomatic and tactful and kind and patient. When I first read Dr. Rossi, I was very vocal, and I would occasionally actually almost get somewhat angry, if you will, that because I saw people being hurt, Aruna. I saw people having operations they never should have had. I saw people getting weaker and weaker, spending thousands of dollars on arch supports and orthotics. I saw people being miseducated by shoe stores about what their arch was like or what their true needs really were. So that's been another aspect of the challenge.
So you are located in Oregon?
Yes.
Okay. And what is I'm just curious, what is your typical morning, like your routine look like?
Yeah. So coffee, shower, pet the cat. I've changed my nutrition recently to eating less carbohydrates, and I guess you would call it intermittent fasting, perhaps. And so I really don't have much of an appetite, so I rarely eat anything in the morning. I see patients in the morning, and I break at noon, and we have a beautiful trail here right close to the clinic. So I go and run on the trail, and there's a nice creek that runs along the trail, and it just kind of sets the tone for the afternoon. And so I go back for the afternoon and see patients and just try to help people move better, help them. I specialize in runners, hikers, and walkers. I also see other athletes, but that's kind of my community. And those are the people that resonate with me and enjoy the same kinds of things that I do. And then later on in the day, obviously, like you, there's a ton of email catch up, scheduling podcasts, which I love to do. I'm always researching. I'm always looking for the next little pearl, the next little clue that's going to help us. I do a lot of writing. Currently working on 2 book projects with colleagues of mine, and then I love cooking. So I have a garden, and I aspired not to have to go to the store. I love to source my own fish and birds and organic vegetables that have never had any kind of chemical put on them. Let's see what else. Yeah. Yoga, music, reading, friendships.
Beautiful. Who inspires you? Can you share with us a couple of your mentors?
Yeah. My primary mentor passed away. I never even met this man, but he was Dr. Rossi, who I told you about. And I'll encourage you to look at his stuff. I'll also encourage your audience to look at his stuff. In his 9th decade, he wrote some of his best articles ever. The one I told you about, Why Shoes Make Normal Gait Impossible. He also wrote he wrote probably 1,250 articles. He wrote several books. He also wrote Children's Footwear, Launching Site for Adult Foot Ills. And that's also pivotal because many of these things start in early childhood. He wrote Fashion and Foot Deformation, where he went around the world and he looked at what cultures do for beauty and for societal inclusion. The ladies in Thailand that put the rings on their neck, the tribes that make the big ear loops, the African tribes that make the cone skull, and so forth. And he pointed out that what we do in America with our footwear is exactly the same. We willfully deform our own feet so that when people standing alongside of us look at our shoes, it's all okay. When I ride my elevator here at work, I've always got something natural and healthy on, and people kind of look at my foot and they take a double take and they're like, what's that? Every once in a while they ask about it, but overwhelmingly I can tell that I'm standing out, and I don't mind because I'm comfortable in my body and I feel good. And I want to be an example. I want other people to see it and accordingly pursue that. So he's probably my primary mentor. My father, who has since passed away, was also a huge influence in my life. Best man I ever knew, taught me so many things about everything, how to treat people, how to work hard, how to accept a challenge, and how to stay positive when things aren't going well. Wow, there's so many people. Dr. Mark Cucazella from Shepherdstown, West Virginia, is a wonderful human being. When I first met him, I thought he was just interested in feet and strengthening feet. He's a marathon runner like I am, but he's also a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He is a professor at the medical school there. He teaches doctors how to grow gardens and how to cook, allopathic doctors. So he's just a wonderful man. So he's a hero and a mentor of mine. Oh, there's so many. Jay DeSherry from Bend, Oregon, a physical therapist, written several books. Oh, there's so many influences in my life. Michael Sandler, who wrote Barefoot Running, Barefoot Walking. Daniel Howell wrote the Barefoot book. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to touch on everybody. There's just so many good influences.
How do you spell Dr. Rossi, his name?
Rossi.
Okay.
First name William.
Okay. And then the Barefoot Running, Michael, what is his last name?
Sandler, Sandler.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Do you have any regrets?
Yes, plenty. I regret that I wore fashionable athletic shoes unknowingly for many years and harmed my own feet. I regret that I took so much Advil college so I could keep running through stress fractures and bone spurs that I had temporary kidney failure.
Mm.
I regret allowing doctors to look at and work on my feet without looking at my shoes. Let's see what else. I regret making a lot of orthotics for people early on who didn't truly need them, and I literally caused them harm. One example is the trail close to my office is a very uneven surface. So part of the time we're walking, hiking like this, part of the time we're like this. And I was making orthotics for all of my trail runners, but the problem is, as you probably know, most orthotics are going to supinate people's feet or invert their feet. And if you're running down the trail like this, and this hand has an orthotic under it, you're gonna you have the tendency to cause those people to have an inversion ankle sprain. So I kept seeing my runners coming in with all these sprains, and I treated it like a sprain, but I didn't realize I was the cause of the sprain. So now I know better. I get people closer to the ground. I get them off the heel. I get the toe spread. Ankle sprains are relatively rare in my practice these days, because as you can imagine, the closer you are to the ground, the more you can feel things. You're sending good, clean information to your brain. Our fifth toe is way more important than we give it credit for. It's actually kind of a lever. You know, if you're starting to sprain your ankle and your foot's like this and there's nothing to evert you, you're going to sprain. Whereas if your toe is out there, it's kind of like a rudder. You can evert away from that ankle sprain. So once we get people set up like that and they feel the ground, they move better, they get injured less, and it's way better for all of us.
Beautiful. Okay. So a little bit about the shoes. For those listeners, the shoes that we get, the brands, Jordans or, whatever shoes, they are not flexible. So you are not able to pack, if you are traveling, you're not able to pack it. But, if it is more flexible shoes, you are able to roll it, right? That's, I'm just trying to convince the listeners to try that, because it's, for those people who travel, it's easy. You can take it anywhere, and trusting the body, that your body is very wise. We just don't give it enough credit. We give comfort, and we are actually disabling the body to be at its best by cushioning our feet with so much. Like you're saying, it's better to slowly transition with a lighter cushion, less cushion, and then hopefully they can transition to natural shoes. So you do have some on your website.
Yes. Yep. And we have a shoe list on the website too. So if the audience wants to look at that, and then if any of your audience happens to be in Portland, Oregon, we've got a shoe store here in the clinic.
Okay. So they can, I do have it here. Let's see. So you do have a YouTube page that says Northwest Foot and Ankle. That's your YouTube page. And then your website, correcttoes.com, has wonderful information. And you are on Facebook as Correct Toes, and then Instagram as Correct Toes. But your website has, enough information where they can find you. And your website also has stores that it is around the US that carries Correct Toes. Do you have it listed on your website where the stores carry some of the shoes that you recommend?
I don't think we have that, Aruna, but I think probably if your audience goes to the store locator, they can probably go to the website of the store. And I'm assuming they'll be able to find that information there.
Okay, perfect. So few questions before we wrap it up. What is one thing that others value and you do not, or you used to value and you do not value that anymore?
Appearance.
Yeah. Good one. How would you define that you are aligned with your purpose or dharma?
How do I know that?
How do you define?
Um, Not caving to other people's expectations or influences, and not feeling like I have to agree with somebody just to get along. So I tend to be an outlier many times, and the older I get and the more confident I become about these truths, the more comfortable I become with that.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mhm.
So if you have in your power to create one principle or one law that is going to be beneficial to everyone in your community, whoever you meet, what would that be?
This may surprise you, but it would be healthy food for everybody. Obviously feet are very important, but I perceive that nutrition is the most important personally. So I would try to make sure everybody gets nutritious food that's not loaded with chemicals and all kinds of artificial things. In keeping with that, though, too, I would wish that everybody had access to what you and I are talking about and what you and I know. Not to force it on everybody, but to give people a logical opportunity to try this. Because what I've discovered is it's not enough to tell people about these concepts. In fact, your audience might be listening and they might think, oh, this is kind of interesting. But in my experience, unless they actually do it themselves, unless they actually feel what we're talking about, it's just a random idea floating around in their mind. However, I guess maybe that would be a law. However, I don't like forcing people to have to choose healthy footwear because it wouldn't necessarily be everybody's choice, although I might want it to be everybody's choice. But what we see here universally is once people feel that, they they don't go back. They don't go back to their orthotics and their arch supports and their fashion shoes other than once in a while for a special event. But here's what happens next. They come in for their follow-up appointment, and if they've done some barefoot and spread their toes and got stronger and got more aware, they will feel better primarily, unless they have something we've missed. But oftentimes, many of those folks will have tried to wear a shoe in their closet that might not have been uncomfortable to them before. A little bit of heel, a little bit of toe spring, a little bit of taper. But they'll say, I tried to put on one of my shoes that was in my closet that I used to wear frequently. And some of these people would even wear it all day long. So think about something like a Danceco clog, the wooden leather clog. That a lot of medical people say is a healthy shoe. A lot of medical people wear them, but a lot of people might wear that prior to meeting with us and feel like everything's fine. Meet with us, go barefoot, get healthy shoes, spread their toes, rehab their feet. And then their brain becomes so aware that as soon as they try to wear those old shoes, their body goes on high alert and their body kind of revolts and almost immediately they're in discomfort. And so they ask me, why did that happen? Why did I used to be able to wear those shoes and now it's intolerable? And I don't have a study to show this, but I perceive it to be, we remove neurologic awareness from little children before they fully develop this foot mind connection. And then I think when we give it back to an older person, it's something that our brain wants to heavily guard because it is our best function. And I think there's a wisdom in that, and I think we should not argue with that. I joke with those patients who are ordinarily women, and I tell them, well, my job's done. Just listen to your body, But it's not that simple. I realize how fashion is such a large component of, well, worldwide. I've been around the globe, and I mean, across the globe, if you're in an urban area, they're following our Western fashion often. So, unfortunately, it's so predominant. It's troublesome.
What I did was, well, actually, I was when I was visiting my friends in India. One of my mom's friends invited me to come over to her roof, and I said, "Why?" She's like, "No, no, come over." So we were climbing the ladder. We went to the roof, and I saw this beautiful scene. You might not think that it's beautiful, but or the listeners might not think. The roof, half of the roof was, so if this is the roof, then half of it, it was covered with different textured pebbles. Different textured pebbles. Literally, they were glued to the ground. And she said, go ahead and take a walk. And I'm like, okay. So I was taking a walk, and it makes so much sense, because it made me feel like connected to the earth, because I cannot think of anything else, right? Anything else, because I was completely present. One, because there were some areas of my foot was like uncomfortable. So I cannot be thinking of anything else, like what food I'm going to eat or what dress I'm going to wear, nothing. So it made me so present. When I felt those uncomfortable areas, I stood there, I literally just massaged my feet there, to be more aware of what is going on, because, you would agree, all the nerve endings there at the bottom of the feet. And then I took a walk and then came back, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm done. And she said her husband thought of this and wanted to do something that is more affordable. And they thought, you know what, let's do this on the roof. So they make it a habit to climb there and then walk. And that's a great way to meditate. You can just listen, if you want to put on a music, you can, but if you don't want to put on a music, that's the best way I would suggest. So I saw that and I came home and I'm like, how can I do this? Make this available for my clients in a smaller scale, right? I cannot make everybody climb the roof. So I'm like, I wanted to make it available for my clients and make them see the benefit. And so one of my clients' husband, he made me this out of wooden boards. He made this long rectangle. And I said, I don't want it like a 4 feet. I want it at least like a 5 feet tall, 5 feet long. And then got some smooth pebbles, not so smooth, but it has some textures from Home Depot or Lowe's. Put it on there, okay? And after the massage, I would say like, okay, now after the massage, I want you to just walk on it. And I would encourage you to take your socks off and walk bare feet. But if you want to wear the socks and just walk, that's fine. And they were like, oh, wow. I'm like, they were like, this is so uncomfortable. I'm like, I know, but trust me, your body will thank you later. And some of them, decided to get that in their home. They keep it in their bedroom, and then they get up in the morning, they do that. So, that is an easy way to be aware of what is going on in the body, connect with the earth in your own way, right? Because those are different textures. And another way is, if you love beaches and if you travel a lot, get a pebble from the beach and add it to your collection. You're creating memories as well. And plus you're doing something good for your body, and your body will appreciate it. So yeah, I did that. And that is my way of, getting people to encourage them to take that step, literally take that step. So yeah, and wearing shoes that are flexible too, that's going to take some time, like you said, but that's my way of bringing it back. So thank you so much. I learned so much, and it's good to hear from people who are embracing the change, and they are walking that walk and talking that talk, and not just preaching it. So it's good to hear from people like you who are making a difference in the community. And I really am honored, that you took the time to come and talk to me and my listeners on my podcast. So I look forward to having more conversations and, sharing. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom.
I look forward to it too, Runa. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.